It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's NFL draft season, and it's my annual visit with my friend Mike Luchene, one of the most accurate draft prognosticators around, three-time big board champion over at the Huddle Report. I mean, who better to talk NFL draft than with my guy, Mike Luchene? Mike, how about that intro? You getting that anywhere else, big guy?
Cody, I always appreciate you. You know that. I've got to step my game up and get back to the top of that leaderboard. But I got to tell you, I always look forward to coming and doing these segments with you. And, the Texans fans, they're really lucky to have you covering the team. I got to tell you, you cover that team from all angles, and you do a fantastic job. Every professional sports team should have somebody who covers the team, as well as you do. And, I'm also really blessed to call you a friend, bud. Good to be here.
You're too kind. The check's in the mail, or should I say the jeans are in the mail. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But, Mike, you and your teammate Ray at NFL Rough Draft, I found you guys, I don't know how many years ago. It feels like it's been a decade at this point. And I love you guys' work. And as I mentioned, you're some of the most accurate draft prognosticators around. So let's dive into it. Texans fans, they want offensive linemen. They want, I affectionately say this, the big uglies, okay? The big uglies up front. They got to keep C.J. Stroud upright in 2025 to be successful, go where they want to go. What's your feel on this offensive line class? Because to me, it feels like there's a whole heck of a lot more interior guys than worthwhile outside guys. And so many of these outside guys, teams feel like they maybe want to move them inside. So it feels like if you're looking for a guard, this is probably the year to be grabbing one. Maybe you'd have to get lucky at tackle. Do you kind of see it the same way?
Yeah, so it's kind of been an interesting process because after the combine, I was talking to Matt Williamson. He used to be over at ESPN. He's a former NFL scout on Twitter or X or whatever they call it these days. And, I said that I've never seen, and I've been doing this, I've been following the draft for decades. We've had our site for 17 or 18 years. I've never seen a class where none of the top offensive linemen projected to go in the top 2 rounds had sub 34-inch arms. Tyler Booker was the only one after the combine who had arms that were more than 34 inches. That's outrageous to me. Now, as it turned out, there was something weird going on with the combine testing because a lot of these guys got to their pro days and they actually had longer arms. So that 34-inch threshold is sort of the benchmark that teams look at for whether or not a guy can stay outside an offensive tackle. I guess you could start with Will Campbell right off the bat. A lot of people have been talking about how, he was 32 and a half at the combine. He went to the pro day. They measured him at 33 inches. Well, I haven't seen this mentioned a lot. His wingspan is less than 78 inches, which for an offensive tackle, that is like the bottom 1 percentile. It's unbelievable. I mean,
and he's a lot of people's top guy.
Yeah, and it looks like he's probably going 4 to the Patriots, or if not there shortly after that. But to put that into perspective, there's a fullback, I guess you could say, or a center. He was a former offensive lineman, Willie Lampkin, who is going to get maybe drafted late in the 7th round.
True.
He's about 275, 280 pounds, so he's obviously not going to stay at tackle. He's got a longer wingspan or a wider wingspan than Will Campbell. That's almost linebacker territory. It's a little bit more than linebacker, but I mean, this is a guy who's a top 5 pick. Then you've got Membao, who people say, well, he's a sure thing at tackle. Well, he might be a right tackle.
Yeah.
And if you're picking a right tackle in the top 6 or 7 picks, I don't know how much value there is there. And his arms are less than 34 inches. They're 33 and a half. You've got Kelvin Banks after that, who should go pretty high. He'll be gone before the Texans pick.
Right off the bat, you're hurting me.
Yeah.
Kelvin Banks, I love him. I don't understand why he's not a surefire top 15 guy for a lot of people. It feels like people are kind of getting there, but man, Banks is the dream scenario at 25 because you could play him at guard for a year and then he's your left tackle in the future.
I agree, and it's tough to speak in certainties about the draft. There are always surprises. I would be shocked. I've seen him in mock drafts going to the Texans. I'd be shocked if he was still there. I think you're right on with him. I think he's top 15. You've got Ursary after that, and then Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons is coming off of a torn patellar tendon. Yeah. That's a top first round pick.
Can't do it. Well, yeah. And then there's so many whispers about the staff didn't love him at Ohio State. And it's like, okay, that immediately for the Texans, that regardless of his knee, but then you factor in the knee. Guys just don't come back from that often enough to feel good about a guy like him.
Yeah, you feel better about it in the second round, right? Like if if he's not going to be there most likely, when you guys are picking again at 58, but you feel better about him, certainly at 40 than you would in the first round. That said, he was invited to the draft, so he's probably going in the first round. So I suppose he's an option. And then Donovan Jackson's the other one. I mean, the guy who took over for him after he got hurt. He could play left tackle. And I saw he visited the Texans, I believe, yesterday or within the last week. Yep. So he's an option for them. And then I've heard Tyler Booker's name, the guard, mentioned there quite a bit. He makes sense in that they need to shore up that offensive line. But my only question there is Titus Howard's staying at left guard. Is that correct? So Booker would play right guard?
I mean, I think that they are very comfortable with whoever the 5 best guys are. We don't care how much money you make. But Titus certainly, it feels like Titus is going to compete for a guard spot. And if that's not the case, then he's probably competing for a backup tackle spot. And then they also signed Laken Tomlinson, but paying Laken Tomlinson $5 million shouldn't keep you from starting the 25th overall pick if you want to play him at left guard.
Yeah, it looked like the Texans made a lot of nice moves like that. Sign Tomlinson, Cam Robinson, Trent Brown. These are all guys that, you bring them in and they're going to patch the hole for, the beginning of the season or maybe all of next year. But you're absolutely right. That doesn't impact your draft plans at all.
Yeah. So let me talk to you about Booker, because when you think about the Houston Texans, you think about what they like. Big school guy, success against other big schools, locker room leader. At the combine, he says, I learned to lead from Will Anderson when we were teammates at Alabama. The Alabama coaches are not shy about saying he's the Will Anderson of offense when it comes to profile and toughness and all that kind of stuff. And then you find out that big, massive human being's just not a great athlete. So there's two sides to the coin. Like, I watch it on Saturdays. The Tide trusted him to go out there, take care of business at left guard. And then, you just worry about guys who aren't great athletes, especially if, an injury pops up and it lowers their athleticism just a little bit more. Where do you kind of stand on Booker as a prospect and amongst the guards?
Well, I think that if he tested better, he might have been top 10 overall.
Wow.
So the testing doesn't really bother me. You mentioned, you did a great job of highlighting all of the positives with him. He's up from my neck of the woods up here in Connecticut too. I've talked to people who know his family and they say all the same things about him. He's a great kid. I think he'd be a home run pick there. If you take a look at, a couple of guys who didn't test as well as they were expected to, and how they ended up working out, it's something to not really be concerned with. So I'll give you 2 examples off the top of my head. Orlando Brown, the tackle. Now, tackles, you worry about the athleticism even more than guard. He fell, he went, in the 3rd round. When I say Orlando Brown didn't test well, I think you remember.
It was a legendary fail.
Absolutely. It was almost like, wow, is this guy even athletic enough to make a team? And he's had a great career. Another example at guard is Gabe Jackson. Gabe Jackson was looked at as being a high second round pick. He fell to the third round, went on to make multiple Pro Bowls. He was pigeonholed as a right guard, and he had a great career as a right guard. So, if you look at Booker as sort of like a Gabe Jackson, I think the Houston Texans would take the next Gabe Jackson with their current situation at 25 right now.
Yeah, that's part of the equation too, is like the Texans are so bad that even if the guy's not, Quentin Nelson, like you just need somebody who's been a lot better than what you've had. So, you don't need an all-pro at 25. You need a guy who can play consistent football. Because they haven't had guys that could play a consistent level of football for a couple of seasons now. Okay, so those are some of the names there around the first round. What do you think about that day 2 depth? Some of the guys that could be available, and I'm just going to go to the guy because he's a channel favorite. When I do lives, the chat loves him. I love him. And, I know this is always a risky proposition when I talk about one of my faves, because if you don't like him, then I gotta look at him a little different. Tate Ratledge, Georgia. What do you make of, as he self-proclaimed himself, a dirtbag at offensive line? What do you make of Tate Ratledge?
I knew you were going there. I knew that was going to be Tate Ratledge, and I'm with you on him. You look at that 58th pick right there. He's got a shot to be on the board there. That's a slam dunk with the 58th pick. I think it's a plug and play starting guard. And you could say the same for his teammate, Dylan Fairchild. Okay. It's a little bit later. So again, you're looking at 79 or 89. You could probably get him there. Again, those are two guys who are probably going to start right off the bat as rookies. And then I'm going to give you another one. And this is really debatable about whether or not he sort of fits with your current roster construction. I know that you drafted Blake Fisher last year in the late second round, and he's kind of looked at as being a right tackle. He struggled a little bit as a rookie. You got Trent Brown there for a year. He was all right last year. He has a hard time staying healthy, but he's there for now. There's that guy, Jalen Travis for Iowa State. Now, nobody's talking about this guy as a third-round pick. But I'll tell you, I went down a rabbit hole the other day. And I've got 3 kids now. I don't have as much time as I used to. But I'm looking at this guy's workout numbers. He had a 35-inch vertical leap. Now, the vertical leap, the broad jump, those are the numbers you want to look at for offensive linemen. It shows you how explosive they are. Obviously, being explosive off the snap is important for an offensive lineman. He's 6'7", a little bit taller than that actually, 340 pounds. His arms are, I think I have the exact measurements written down here, almost 35 inches long. He's a tackle, by the way. It's a right tackle. 10.5-inch hands, so very high number there. He did 26 reps, so he's strong. He went to Princeton, but then he graduated from Princeton and played a year in Iowa State. So it's not like the Yale kid from last year who went in the early third round where it's, he played in the Ivy League and we haven't seen him against tougher competition. He played at Iowa State last year. And he ran a 5'1", 440, which is truthfully terrific for a guy who's 6'7" and 340 pounds. I'm looking through these developmental tackle types from the last 15 years. And I'm saying, where are the guys with these measurables who fell out of the top 100? And I had to stop after a while. But, you go back to Blake Fisher from last year, okay, what we talked about. He was looked at as being very athletic. Maybe he's a left tackle. Remember when he got to Notre Dame, everybody thought he was going to be better than Joe Alt. Well, Travis's numbers are much better than Blake Fisher. Okay, Julian Davenport. Let's go back about 10 years now or so. He had a little bit longer arms, but everything else not as good as Jalen Travis. And Davenport was a 4th-round pick.
Texans fans remember him well, yeah.
Yeah. So I went down this rabbit hole of trying to find guys who fell out of the 4th or out of the 3rd round with this guy's measurables, and it's really tough. Jordan Mailata didn't play football. That's probably the closest comparison to this guy's measurables. And
Oh,
so he's
you got me excited here, Mike. See, this is why you're one of the best. I haven't heard a soul in the universe talk about Jalen Travis.
yeah.
And
So
you
I
got
think he could be a fourth round pick, but I just don't know how he gets out of day two.
wow, okay, all right. So that's one for Texans fans to kind of keep in the back of their mind. Look, because that's Texans fans, I know I do too, want offensive linemen. So, you get a starter in the first or second round on the offensive line. If one of those third round picks is the future at left tackle or right tackle, I mean, it's a worthwhile investment. I'm not taking I don't want to take a future guy in the first round or the second round, but you got that additional capital in the third. If they somehow snuck into the fourth and had a selection early in the fourth that they could spend on one of these guys, like Cam Robinson's on a 1-year deal. I have no idea if Titus Howard's going to be on this team after this year, and I have no idea if Blake Fisher's any good at football. So having a developmental guy that hey, we're drafting this guy, he's going to learn, get in the NFL locker room, get an NFL offseason program, and then next year we're giving him a crack at this thing. I mean, you could do a whole lot worse in the third, fourth round.
Yeah, I think he could be your starting right tackle by the end of the season.
Ooh. All right. I'm in. Jalen Travis. Okay, we'll mark that one down. So that people don't forget it. What if I told you I found the best jeans ever, and you're going to get 15% off those jeans when you use my link in the description down below. The Perfect Jean, my new partner's here on the channel, bringing you this video with my buddy Mike Luchene. He's going to get a pair of jeans for doing the video, and you can get 15% off a pair of jeans. When I said the Perfect Jean, I mean it, okay? These are the best jeans I have ever worn. They keep you warm when it's cold outside. Not a problem for Houstonians anytime soon, but they're breathable and lightweight in hot weather. I've been wearing them here in the month of April, and I don't hate myself for wearing pants outside in April because these jeans are the best. It's hard for me as a big guy to find jeans, but these fit perfectly. You've got free returns and free exchanges, plus free shipping and 15% off. What more can you ask for? Try out my friends at The Perfect Jean. Get you a pair of elite, incredible jeans like I have at The Perfect Jean. Link in the description down below will auto-apply your 15%. And again, free and easy exchanges. Try out a bunch of different styles. Try out a bunch of different colors. Find the perfect jean for you, like I found the perfect jean for me with my friends at The Perfect Jean. By the way, if you guys have questions, we don't get to a prospect that you really like. I know there's some big, super deep sleeper offensive linemen that the people have asked about before. Get in the comment section, and either myself or Mike will do our best to give you a little bit of an answer or a conversation about some of those players. Or if you need something clarified from Mike, he's going to be hanging around in the comment section of these videos. So we appreciate his time. All right, we talked about these offensive linemen, Mike. Let's talk about these wide receivers. Offensive linemen, it's like your vegetables. They're necessary. They don't always taste good. They're not always exciting when it comes to the draft. Those pass catchers, baby. Those guys that catch the ball, score points for you, that gets everybody excited. Let's go right to those first-round guys. You and I had a discussion a couple weeks ago about Tetairoa McMillan. I got a hard time seeing him getting in the range for the Texans. I would say same with Matthew Golden, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. But the two guys that I feel like are almost always there when people are thinking about 25, Luther Burden from Missouri, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Where do you stand on those two guys?
Yeah, so my second tier after the top two that you mentioned would be Ibuka and actually Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. I like Burden as a second round pick. Some of the stuff with him kind of scares me. It's some of the same things that, have sort of been mentioned with McMillan kind of pop up with Burden as well. But he's also sort of like a guy that they manufactured touches for last year. I think I saw some stat where some huge percentage of his targets were inside of 10 yards.
Right.
And
that's always scary. It's always scary when an offense blows a guy's numbers up,
Right. Because I mean, Tej Johnson's another guy like that who's probably going to be a fourth or fifth round pick. This process started, and everyone said, "Oh, Tej Johnson's 155 pounds, but look how much he gets open." Well, Tej Johnson caught, I think, 34, 35 passes behind the line of scrimmage last year. So if you look at his stat line, sure, it looks great, but not that's not going to be sustainable, right?
Yeah.
So, Burton certainly, I think, could be there at 25. Again, people like him more than me. I have not heard that Higgins could go ahead of Burton, so I think I'm in the minority on this. And Ibuka is sort of just like your do-it-all, high character, hard worker, sort of second receiver, which I think would be a really nice fit for your team because you clearly have, your top receiver with Nico Collins.
So I think the word I think of when I think about Emeka Egbuka, it just feels safe. Even if he reaches his most likely outcome, he's a useful football player for your team. He's maybe the third wide receiver, does some of the dirty work, and that's kind of what he does. Now that's not ideal with the 25th overall pick. I do wonder if his top end is just a little bit higher than people give him credit for because of some of the success that he had at Ohio State. A few years ago with CJ Stroud, he had a big year. This past year, people forget, receptions leader for Ohio State. They had one of the best guys in the country at wide receiver in Smith, and Egbuka, out-touches him when it's all said and done. He's the all-time receptions leader for Ohio State. I do wonder if, now he's got to hit it, obviously, and it's a less likely outcome to hit that top end than some of these other guys. But I do wonder if maybe his top end's a little higher than most give him credit for, while his floor is really high as well, which it's not bad to be a safe pick. I just don't know if you want safe at 25 overall.
Yeah, it's a good value though. I mean, if you have him on on his rookie deal, wide receiver has become a really expensive position on the open market. So, in that regard, if you get a solid number 2 receiver right there, you don't have to worry about hopefully signing any other receivers for the next couple of years.
Sure. All right. Tell me about Higgins, because I like Higgins too. He's a fan fave, and I gotta be honest. I see a little Nico Collins to Jaden Higgins' game. Am I off there?
No, that's a great comparison actually, and I think he's getting underrated really because of Jalen Noel at the Senior Bowl. Now, everybody's talking about how Noel was the guy who was gaining the separation and he looked good in practice there. The problem with that is these smaller receivers are always going to look like the better receivers at the Senior Bowl. And one-on-one drills, that's...
Yep. Tez Johnson did just that. We just talked about Tez. Tez had a big Senior Bowl. Xavier Restrepo, another small guy that had a big Senior Bowl.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so these slot receivers are sort of, they're sort of guys that you could get on day 3. You mentioned Restrepo. Restrepo ran a 4.8, so he's going to be 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, but he's a good player. He could be a Hunter Renfrow type. And so when you have your choice there, and you've got this guy who's 6'2", I believe, ran a 4.42, and Higgins plays outside. Those types don't grow on trees. You're always going to find a slot receiver in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, or even later.
Yeah, so I just envision Higgins just mossing somebody in the end zone. Like I just see it every time I think about him in the NFL. He's a big body. He's not afraid to get a little physical. And then guys don't often talk about how much they like. He's mentioned it a couple different times. I want to win in the red zone. I want to be a red zone weapon. I want to be the target in the red zone. And I'm just like, you love hearing that because the game changes down there. There's not as much space. Guys are more physical. Referees let more go. And to have a guy kind of know, you got to take it to the next level there. Okay, it's good. It's good. So I got a couple more names for you here at wide receiver. Probably maybe right around in that same range. Where are you on Jack Besh? LSU, then to TCU, tight end to then wide receiver, inside to outside. Obviously, a very unique offseason for him. Great story at the Senior Bowl, but the stories don't help you win on Sundays. Football players do. Where you at on Besh?
Yeah, I like Besh. I think Besh is, he's going to come off the board right around that range where, again, 58, where the Texans are picking it. He should be a late second round pick or an early third round pick. It's hard not to root for that guy. You mentioned the story there with his brother. Unfortunately being part of that tragedy in New Orleans back on New Year's a couple years ago. But, I think, again, here's one of these big outside receivers, and I prefer those types when you're picking in the second or third round. You're looking for a starting receiver over these, sort of smaller slot type receivers that you can get anywhere. So I like Besh. I think he's a lock for the top 100. I wouldn't call him a lock for the second round, but certainly, top 70 or 75 for sure.
All right, a guy with a lot of conversation, another Senior Bowl standout. And you look at the college and you're like, I don't recognize some of the teams he's playing against, but he's having big days. And then he also has some big moments against Travis Hunter in his college career. Washington State's Kyle Williams. It feels like he's a draft darling and is kind of flying up people's boards here throughout the offseason. Where are you on Kyle Williams?
Yeah, he's fast. He's fast, and you're right. He is flying up the boards. I think he's a top 100 lock at this point. I'm having a hard time getting a read on where he's going to go because it wouldn't surprise me to see the second round for him. If you asked me back in February, I think I would have said 79 or 89 here for the Texans. He would have been there. Now I don't know if that's going to be the case. He's a player I like a lot, and he's got a lot of buzz around the league. When we come out with our final top 100 that we submit to the huddle report, he's definitely going to be there.
All right, just fire me off 2 or 3 names here. Day 3 guys. I'm in the camp of get a day 2 wide receiver and then also get a day 3 wide receiver. Just bring as many bodies as you can. Give me some late round wide receivers, some scratch off tickets that got pretty good odds or pretty big odds if you hit them.
Yeah, so Ty Felton, he's a guy who might go a little bit earlier than what the media is projecting. So
Maryland, right?
Yeah, Maryland. So he led the Big Ten in receiving last year. And again, this might not end up fitting that category because it wouldn't shock me to see him in the third round. But I think most people have him as a 4th round pick, maybe even in the 5th round. But here's a guy who ran a 4.37. We mentioned the production, which, isn't – you want to see the production. It's not the determining factor. But the 4.37 – and then you take a look at the fact that he plays special teams as well. He's a gunner on punts, and he also plays kick coverage. So you're looking at a guy where if you take this guy in the 4th round, you know that he's going to have immediate value. He's going to be a part-time receiver. He's going to play special teams, kind of like like you guys took Cade Stover last year, where he didn't need to see the field right away at tight end because you knew he was going to be a good special teams player. Let's see another one. Let me see if I could reach a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah, get deep in the bag. The name that, if it doesn't hit, that's fine. But if it does hit, you heard it here first from Mike Luchene from NFL Rough Draft.
All right, let's see here. All right. How about Dante Thornton?
Yes.
I haven't heard anybody talk. Okay, Dante Thornton.
The chat, when we do mock drafts, when I'm live, the chat loves the Tennessee Speedster.
Yeah, so I think for people who play Madden, right, this is like the type of guy that they make and create a player. You look at his yards per catch, it's up over 20 yards per catch. It was just some ridiculous number. It might even have been 25. I don't remember off the top of my head, but he had a ridiculous yards per catch.
It was 25.4.
25.4 yards per catch, which is absolutely unheard of. If you get a guy who's averaging 15, 16 yards per catch, that's a great number. So he's, 10 yards more than that. Now, he didn't have a lot of catches. He's sort of like a one-trick pony. He's going to be running, vertical routes, but he's big too. This isn't some guy who's, 5'10", 170 pounds, and he's just fast. So here's a guy who I think could be there in maybe the 5th round, 6th round. And, he's a guy you bring in. He's going to be a situational type player, but he's got some really intriguing size and speed. I think what did he run at the 40? 4.3, something like 4.3 flat or something like that at the combine.
I want to say, gosh, he was one of the fastest wide receivers, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
Yeah. So he was one of the fastest wide receivers at the combine, and boy, he was flying. Yeah, 4.3 flat, I think.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
I can't remember my social security number, but I remember random 40-yard dash times from the combine.
4.3 flat at 6'4", almost 6'5", and 205 pounds.
Yeah, over 25 yards per catch too, and that's in the SEC.
Yeah. So man, that's the folks are gonna love that because they love Thornton. Oregon, where he started his career, finished up at Tennessee, and as you mentioned, just speed demon, and in a great package. So I think the folks will like that. Okay, I got one name I want to ask you about wide receivers. One late round guy is Mike. You're the first person I'm telling this to, and the folks are going to bookmark this, and they're going to give me hell if it doesn't happen. But you'll remember it when I say this. I think I found a poor man's Puka Nacua late in the draft. Now, not Puka Nacua, not going to be one of the best right away, but, poor man's version. Isaac Tesla from Arkansas.
Yeah, he's definitely a favorite of a lot of people. I see both of those Arkansas guys are really going to be interesting players in the 5th or 6th round. And, again, you're going out on the limb on a day 3 guy, right? So for anybody watching this, you're not saying he's the next Puka Nacua. That's really, really hard to find the next Puka Nacua on day 3. But yeah, he has a really, really intriguing height, weight, speed combination. We were just talking about Thornton. Certainly, you could put Tesla in that same category, that same bucket. So I think, again, 5th, 6th round is probably the right spot for him. And drop one other guy in that same type of mold would be Nick Nash from San Jose State. Again, big receiver. He was a quarterback. I think he played 7 years in college. So he was a quarterback until recently and put up just eye-popping production.
Gaudy numbers.
Yeah. But again, he's one of these sort of big height, weight, speed types. And, the other thing with these bigger guys like Tesla and Nash is these guys are appealing in the 5th, 6th round because they end up turning into good special teams players. Sort of to throw one name out there from the past, Jeff Janis, the receiver from the Green Bay Packers. He was this big height, weight, speed guy. And, maybe there were a lot of people who thought that he was going to end up developing into some kind of, freakish wide receiver 1 type. And, that's hard to find on day 3. But he ended up being a really good special teams player. And I think you could see the same thing with that bucket of receivers, and Tesla is certainly in that.
Love it. O-linemen, wide receivers, a big, fantastic breakdown from one of the best draft prognosticators, one of the most accurate draft prognosticators, Mike Luchene, NFL Rough Draft. You got to check out the website, NFLRoughDraft.com. We got the link in the description down below. They'll have that final top 100 out. So when you're sitting around on day 4 and you've already highlighted all the guys that got drafted and someone's in that top 100 for the Rough Draft guys, your team wants them. Okay. And the Texans will want them too. They got to get in the 4th round, man. I don't know how they do it. They got to get in the 4th round. Mike, we got another conversation coming up later this week. So greatly appreciate you stopping in to talk a little O-linemen and wide receivers with us.
Hey, it's always fun, Cody.
All right. We'll get to some more with Mike. Be on the lookout for that video, and appreciate you for checking this long discussion out, and NFLRoughDraft.com, where you can find more from Mike and his teammate Ray.